All right, so we have a JPA schema, right? It magically created this table on the SQL side, and we actually want to write to the database now, right? And when do we want to do that? We want to do it right here, right, in the register. When the object comes in, we would like to do the insert into a database. Yes? All right, so let's do that. So to do that, we're going to need an additional component called the repository. The repository, right? So in most ORMs technologies, right, there is an entry point to the API, right? Of how is it that you grab a hold of the actual database and you start talking to it, right? And often cases referred to as the repository, the database repository. Okay, and so let's create a repository, and it's going to hold all the functions that we'll need to talk to a database, to be able to insert, delete, update, find things, retrieve things, right? It'll have very generic API that can insert anything, not just users. It'll be able to insert anything you want in there, right? In particular, users. You need to configure it. You have to say, these are the things that I want to insert, right? So let's do that. Let's create a new class. This will live under repositories, right? And the class name will be the user repository. So typically, you'll have a different repository for every table, right, or every relationship that you want to handle, manipulate, right, that you want to have CRUD operations, right? And the user repository is the one who's going to give us those CRUD operations, okay? And it's not a class. It should be an interface. It's an interface. And it's going to be, we're not going to implement it, right? We're going to have one of the ORM's own default repositories implement this for us, right? Because it's going to have all the generic CRUD operations for us. We don't want to have to implement any of this, right? So we're going to extend CRUD repository. There it is, CRUD repository. So now this is a create, read, update, and delete. It has the 4 main operations we want. We just need to configure it. What is it that you want to CRUD? I want to CRUD a user. It also needs to be configured. What is its primary key? How do I know? How do I determine one user versus another user? How do well, those are integers. The integer is the primary key, right? The IDs are primary keys, right? And we need to load the user. We need to import it, and it's right here. Okay, so we have a CRUD repository. This will now provide finders, updates, saves, deletes, all the functions that we need for what? For users, right? Okay, so let's go back to our service. We need now this user repository. Let's grab it. Let's grab the user repository. So we're going to we could instantiate the repository, but it's more common to have the infrastructure instantiate it and pass it to us as an argument. The user repository, and it'll be the user repository. Okay, and we'll need to auto-wired import. Okay, so now we have the user repository. So the only thing we need to do here is just we can say, hey, user repository. Dot. Notice that it has a whole bunch of functions in here. It has count, meaning I can count how many instances of these things are in the database. I can delete. I can find all, meaning retrieve everything, select star from user, right? It has save. Save allows me to insert as well as update, right? It's already there. So let's do a save. So save, you pass it instances of what the repository is expecting, right? The repository, we configured it using the user, saying this is the things that I want to save, right? So we're going to say we need to pass it things of the same data type, and indeed we are user. There it is. Okay. What the save function returns it returns instances of the same thing that it instantiates, right? That it saves, users. Right? So instead of doing a return user, we can just return what the save returns. Right? Meaning after it saves, right, return what you saved. Okay. All right. So let's restart the server. While that's going, let's go back to our server, to our database. Don't save. If we do a user and we say a select, notice that we currently don't have any users, right? It's empty. Right? We have first name. So let's go back here, and now it has started. Let's try and register Alice. Where was it? Where did Alice go? Oh, do I have it? Okay, there it is. Let's clear this out, and let's say register Alice. Okay, so it was successful. If we look at the register, notice that it comes back with ID equal to 1. It doesn't come back as null. So somebody chose that ID to be 1, right? Presumably after having done an insert. Right? If we go back to the database and we do a query again, we refresh, notice that indeed we have the record having been inserted in the database. You see that? So it has been inserted, and you can even look at the command that was used to insert this. Right? This is the actual SQL that was used. Right? You know, insert into user, the name of the fields, and the values as placeholders, right? As prepared statements. Right? If you've seen a database before this, you might have used prepared statements. Right? This is exactly what the syntax that it was used. Notice that it did not add the ID field in here, right? Because the ID was declared, right? It was declared. It was declared to be auto increment, right? Notice that indeed the field ID, right, was declared to be auto increment. So every time we insert, we register one more. So let's register more folks. Let's do Bob. Register, and then Charlie, Garcia, register. If we go back to the database server and we execute, right, we'll see that indeed we have all three users listed there, right, as having been inserted in there. Make sense? All right. So we have a way to register. Obviously, there would be a lot of validation that would have to be done. Right. First, check to see if that username is already taken. If not, then no, I'm not going to let you. All right. So, for instance, we would need to be able to query the database first, right, to see if this works. Right. So let's see how we could instead of inserting, maybe querying the database back. All right. So let's take a look at that next.